Well, the UAE and the United Kingdom have always enjoyed a long history of close cooperation. Many very strong UK firms have been based here since the very founding of the Emirates. However, today we have signed a memorandum of understanding between us. Its objective is to try and deepen that level of collaboration, have more firms and people and capital between our two great, strong financial centres. Well, we're all facing challenges of geopolitics, of how we cope with a changing climate, and how we grow our economies and diversify them in the strongest way that we can. So there's always challenges, but how do we overcome those challenges? It's by working more closely together, having good quality regulatory standards, but also making sure that we explore new opportunities, areas that are really fast growing like fintech, artificial intelligence, and allowing the free flow of capital around the world. AI is a big opportunity. It's a big opportunity for the world. It's a big opportunity in financial services because traditionally they are associated with lots of data. So they have lots of different data sets on which the AIs can work and improve things. There's also risks and challenges, greater possibility of fraud. It's one reason why next week in the United Kingdom, there'll be a global AI summit. The UAE will be represented at that summit to talk about what they call frontier AI, which is those new emerging areas such as large language models, generative AI, as to how we can make sure that the growth and the opportunity that we absolutely see in AI is pursued responsibly and that ordinary citizens benefit from that. Look, after leaving the European Union, the UK has a really good opportunity because it can once again write its own rules. So the UAE has its own sovereign ability to set its own rules within a very high quality global framework, and the UK now has exactly that same opportunity. So we're pursuing closer relationships with the Gulf, with the CPTPP, some of the fastest growing economies, with the Commonwealth, countries like Australia and New Zealand and Japan. So the UK's always been very global. It's always been very open. It's international by design. And now that we've got the ability as a country once again to make our own rules, form our own agreements, the UK can make good use of that and is doing so. And this is one small example of that we're able to forge closer relationships between the UK and the UAE, one of the strongest economies in the region. We're in a better position because we can, in the case of financial services, for example, we can make our own rules that fit the fact pattern of our economy and allow us to work not just with 27 other European countries, which we do, but also other countries around the world, such as the UAE. So the UK economy has been very resilient. It's been one of the fastest growing G7 European economies coming out of the pandemic, with the fastest growth for the last couple of years. Like a number of economies, we've struggled with some of the supply side inflation that we've seen after Putin's war in Ukraine and the global pandemic. So that disrupted supply chains and it's put inflation within our economy. It's why our number one priority is to reduce inflation. Inflation is coming down now. It's on track to halve this year compared with last year. And by reducing inflation, which is the thing that governments can try and influence, that in turn will allow the Independent Bank of England the possibility of reducing interest rates thereafter. But overall, the UK economy is in resilient shape. It hasn't gone into recession. It's not growing as fast as we would like, but it's resilient. And if we can continue to bear down on inflation, that is the path to then reduce interest rates. The first thing we've got to do is to reduce inflation. By so doing, the Bank of England then, who are trying to slow the economy a little bit through using interest rates, thereafter, that will give them the space. They make their decisions, not me, but that will give them the opportunity, if we can reduce inflation, to reduce interest rates thereafter. Well, I think in the case of financial services, the two go hand in hand, actually, that good financial markets need international rules. Very few firms operate in only one market. They tend to operate on a global or a multi-market basis. And for that reason, having a compatible set of international rules is one of the preconditions for growth. So if we want to grow our domestic economy, and financial and professional services are a really big part of that, then being part and influencing international rules through bodies like the G20, the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, the World Bank, Financial Stability Board, influencing those and being part of that rule-setting process is really important to the firms that operate in the UK, those that also operate in the UAE, and the UK has a strong voice as a standard setter. I think the big thing within that framework of high-quality rules is to be flexible, agile, sometimes a little bit faster. It's one reason why over the last year we've introduced a new duty across all of our financial regulators to promote growth and international competitiveness. So I think it's less often about the rules themselves, but sometimes it's about, for example, the speed of authorizations with which those rules are carried out. I think that's a challenge for any regulator anywhere in the world, but an opportunity for the UK is to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more agile, have a little bit more risk in the system. Post 2008, there was a trend. The lever moved a little bit to try and mitigate or extinguish risk, and it's right that you get the right balance between unnecessary risk, which you don't want in a financial system, but also enough risk that allows people to experiment and to take risk in order to grow the economy and prosperity. Lots of similarities. They're both very open economies. The UAE, just like the United Kingdom, relies upon a much broader set of markets and opportunities just in its own domestic economy. So they're both open, both very internationally looking, both very cosmopolitan with people of many nationalities. London is the most diverse city on the planet in terms of the birth country of the people that live there. And they're both high quality, sophisticated markets. The UAE has grown to that position over a much shorter time frame. The UK has great and deep heritage in financial services, but there are many, many similarities. And if I look at some of the areas of opportunity that we talked about in this agreement, areas like fintech, like the possibility of using AI in financial services, extending credit to smaller and more entrepreneurial businesses, there are lots of similarities. We're working in lots of the same areas. So COP28 is a huge moment for the world, for the UAE. The whole world's eyes will be here. And sustainable finance, ensuring that when capital is invested and people look at how markets operate, that sustainability is one of the key attributes I'm quite sure will be central to that. The UK itself has been a leader in the past in sustainable finance. And as the world comes together, one of the important opportunities is to try and reach common standards. That could be for carbon markets, it could be common international sustainability standards frameworks, so that when companies and firms have to disclose what their impact on the environment is, we do so on the basis of a common standard that's easy to understand for investors. That's, I think, a big opportunity. Well, there's a big piece of work about what we call a transition task force, getting the frameworks right that don't see disinvestment in companies that are trying to do the right thing, but potentially starting from a world where they're quite reliant on hydrocarbons, or indeed they're involved in the extraction of hydrocarbons. They, like the rest of us, are on a journey, which is why we call it a transition. And so one of the things that the UK is always focused on is how do you ensure that you finance the transition, not do the easy thing of just saying, well, I won't invest in those companies at all, because that won't get the world the capability to make the transition that we need. That's one thing. Another is the emergence of what are green bonds. So raising bond finance for companies or for countries that specifically is ring-fenced only to be used for projects that have strong sustainability credentials. Well, I think the UAE's leadership on COP28 has been very strong. As ever, you have to see what happens when the world turns up. But the UAE is well positioned in the sense of a country and an economy that is absolutely trying to make that transition. In Masdar, you have a world-leading example of a low-carbon, sustainable future, and the UAE itself has significantly diversified its sources of revenue. So I think in many cases, you're a great example of what the world needs to emulate. Look, I hope so. We'll have to see. I wish the organisers, of the COP28 all the best success. It's a difficult endeavour trying to drive global consensus, but the preparation I know that has gone into COP28 in the UAE could not be better. Well, the world's never needed open financial markets, free flows of capital, and free trade more than now. That is something that the UK has always been a strong exponent of. There are so many challenges in the world, from populations that are aging to young people that we need to give hope and prosperity for the future, to the changing climate that we face, and geopolitical challenges, that what we need, the last thing we need is fragmentation, and more of what we need is markets collaborating well together and allowing the much needed capital to flow. The transition alone to clean energy is going to be one of the most capital intensive transitions that the world has ever seen. In that world, everybody needs access to investment. That includes the global south, almost more than ever need good access to productive capital. And that's what the UK's voice is always put to use for. The agreement we've reached with the UAE today is an example of that, trying to remove friction and deepen ties, but the world needs that on a much bigger stage as well. There's always challenges, and this is a difficult time in the world. It's very important that in that environment, nations don't turn in on themselves, that we redouble our efforts and seek to confound those who would, whether through terror or other means, seek to fragment us. That's their vision of a world. Our vision of a world is one that is open, it's inclusive for everybody, it's responsible, but it also benefits from free flows of capital that in the past has lifted billions of people out of poverty, it's extended human life, and those are noble aims that we should continue to strive for.